Hey everyone, it's Jen again, and this week I've just been diving into development for Mission 9. Mostly doing some scripting, finishing up Deita's skill trigger animation, which you can kind of see I started out with like a certain idea in mind and then I ended up changing, so I kind of wasted a bit of energy creating this like water splash effect that I didn't end up using. Yeah, I think I had this idea in mind for how I wanted her skill trigger to be, and then as I was drawing it, I felt like it didn't quite fit what I was looking for, and I wanted to try to do something a little bit different. And what I ended up like going for was a little bit more subdued and maybe a little bit less like flashy than some of the other skill triggers. And I was second guessing maybe if it was a little bit too simple, but I don't know. I think it suits her personality and the type of character she is, because even though she is canonically a very powerful character and her skill trigger is a very powerful skill, she is sort of like that person behind the curtains who is really the driving factor that started this whole adventure for the protagonist, but she does not really come to the forefront or even really like, I guess, talk herself up or how powerful and insightful she is, other than the fact that everybody else revere her as the great seer. So yeah, I think that I'm satisfied with how her skill trigger turned out. I think it kind of plays up to her understated elegance. Well, I don't know if it's so much that it's understated. I think that I wanted her to be an elegant character, but she's not ostentatious about it. So she has some flourishes to her costume that I think have an air of sophistication, some of the lines, but it's not overly ornate or overly embellished, I think. So yeah, I was happy with how it turned out in the end. And while this drawing is playing, I'm just going to talk a little bit about where else I'm at, because that was how I was kind of spending some of my free time in the mornings before I go to work, and some of my free time when I come home, and I like to just kind of relax and decompress by like listening to some commentary videos or podcasts. And while I'm listening to that, I will just kind of like draw and like zone out. And then I often touch upon how writing is such a is so much more difficult in a lot of ways for me, because it is like needing to have some quiet, needing to get my brain in a certain headspace, and it just feels more effort. I feel like I have to put more intentional effort into what I'm doing, because I have to really focus, especially at this stage of the story, because there are so many conversations and possible conversations that the player may or may not have had that I have to keep track of in order for the characters to react appropriately to the situation. So there's a certain amount of like main story that I need to make sure that I'm meeting these certain requirements to get to the ending and have the ending make sense. So I've got to remember to include those key points, and a lot of that has to do with like revealing motivations. And then I also have to make sure that the character's voice is authentic, so I have to really like put myself into the shoes of that character. And Arcane Dice Wars has a pretty large cast, so that's a lot of different characters to kind of keep track of. And then I also have to make sure that the characters are addressing the protagonist and each other in a way that makes sense to how their relationships and their alliances are developing. So Sometimes I will do that with a conditional to say, okay, well, they would only say this if they were in like this type of relationship or that type of relationships. But a lot of the conversation, especially the ones where they're not like the private one-on-one conversations, there's not a lot of variance there, because I think it's besides, I guess, creating less work for myself, to have like a main branch of the storyline that's not so affected by those little choices. Besides that, I do find that in real life interactions, that even if you are close to somebody, when you are in the company of others, you will tend to adjust accordingly. Like, people will not usually be so intimate in front of others as they would be if they were only one-on-one. So I guess that's another excuse to not have to do too much variance, unless, you know, in the case of the carriage scene in Mission 8, there was a little bit of jealousy going on there. So in that context, I had a lot of little conditionals to affect what type of snide or snippy remarks that the characters might be saying, because that would be affected, and if they were just being a bit protective of the main character because of their friendship, or if it was more of a romantic jealousy. So I will take the time when it makes sense, but when it doesn't make sense or is unnecessary, I try not to make a bunch of extra work for myself. I do think of this as being somewhat of a first draft that I will probably go back and polish once the whole game is done. I did that a bit with Soul Union, and I do plan on going back over the 150,000 words in Villain's Heart. I want to go back and update the sprites and add the skill triggers and add some of the systems that like made the combat dialogue and all of that more consistent and capitalized, and just update the files so that they are more optimally formatted. Because even if it's still under the like 1 gigabyte limit, there's no need to like just let it be larger than it needs to be for that sake. Like, I might as well go in and update the assets to make them more optimized to the WebPs instead of having them as these unnecessarily larger PNGs. So along with some copy edits that I already have from my copy editor, I will probably go in there and spruce up some of the dialogue, and I will make some more unique sprites for it, and I might actually go in and adjust some of the scenes that might have been a little bit too rushed or a little bit too long, see where I can trim a little bit of the fat and flesh it out a little bit. There were some things that I also hadn't really fully figured out, like the whole ring and pendant system that is touched upon in Villain's Heart, but I hadn't created the crafting system in Arcane Dice Wars. So I think, well, I know that the love interest just gave the protagonist what they described as a red eternal heart, which doesn't make any sense anymore now that I have like the specific eternal hearts that are crafted with the soul stones, or heart stones. So I'm gonna go in and make sure there's no inconsistencies like that either, that I decided to either alter or flesh out more in Arcane Dice Wars. So that's way in the future though. Sorry to get off on a rail. I've got some test footage here too of Deita's skill trigger finished and used in the Ren'Py game engine, so I'll include that as well. And I don't really have a whole lot else going on with development to talk about, because again, I've just been scripting, and that's just writing stories, so not a whole lot interesting thing going on there, unless you're heavily invested in the characters and stories, and then you probably still wouldn't be able to really benefit much from my talking about that as you would just experiencing the game itself. So have a great week. Thanks for watching, and take care. Don't forget to enjoy the process. Bye now.
You can't escape.
I'll lend you my power.
Skill trigger.
Fate is turning.
Double bonus.
Together, we can do this. Allow me to assist. I'll lend you my power.
Skill trigger.
Open your eyes.
Double bonus.